Rachel, you have email number 1.
All right, and this comes from Christopher in Dalmatia. Question, with all the hating on social media, what are you doing to show people that it's possible to work together even when different parties are involved?
Yeah, I think Pennsylvania actually is a good case in point of what we can do working across the partisan divide. There's a clear partisan divide here in Harrisburg. The Republicans control overwhelmingly the Senate and the House. And yet last year, actually over the last 2 years, we've gotten some, I think, interesting things done. I just have, for example, I have probably in the last 2 years, I think this is right, gotten more investment in education at all levels than any governor, any administration in the history of the Commonwealth.
We'll fact check that later.
Fact check that, yeah. If you look at K through 12, it's been about $415 million increase. If you look at higher education, it's been a big increase there. Community colleges, early childhood, about $60 million. Special education, about $50 million. And we've also, I was governor to sign the fair funding formula. It was a bipartisan effort, actually chaired by 2 Republicans, so I'm proud of that. I expanded Medicaid. I could do that with an executive order, and there are 700,000 Pennsylvanians who have health insurance now. As a result of that, 63,000 of whom are getting treatment for substance use disorder. Legalized medical marijuana. Reached across the aisle for that. Reached across the aisle for the addressing the opioid epidemic. Liquor reform. The first I ran on modernization of the liquor system. Fundamental changes. You can now buy wine and beer. I know if you're from New Jersey, this might not be a big deal, but Pennsylvania is the first big change in the liquor system since Prohibition.
Since Prohibition, yeah.
So, you look back over the last 2 years in a divided government here in Harrisburg, and I'm very proud of what we've done together here.
Christopher mentioned about the social media aspect of people just hating on each other these days. I know that you have done Facebook events, but are you on Facebook? Do you see what's going on out there with people just losing their minds over every little thing, especially in the last week or 2?
Well,
what do you think about that?
Civility is is something that I think is important in a healthy democracy, and we've got to be able to. American history, we all in any society, there are people who just want to yell at each other, but the folks who get things done are the folks who sit down and say, okay, we disagree. Let's figure out how we can actually work together. That's the challenge of government, and it's really the challenge of self-government. And I think it's why American democracy is such an unusual thing. It's worked for so long because in the end, there's a lot of yelling and huffing and puffing, but in the end, people do sit down and say, okay, let's figure out what we can do here and make lives better and make this government work.
All right, we're going to move on to email number 2. Lewis in Roston wrote in, speaking of liquor reforms, Lewis says, beer and wine changes are great. When will liquor be included so state stores go away? I don't know if we want state stores to go away. I know you don't want state stores to go away.
Well, here's the deal, Lewis. I think most Pennsylvanians want and deserve the convenience, and that's what I have tried to do, working with the legislature in terms of making sure wine and beer are within easier reach. That you have that in the grocery store when you're looking for a meal, you actually have the wine there. With the beer, you can buy that in convenience stores and gas stations and supermarkets too. And I think that's where the convenience is. I'm concerned about simply just giving the system away. I want to make it convenient. I want to modernize it. I want to make it better in doing this kind of thing. And I'm sure there are things that we could continue to do to make it better. But here's the central problem. We all, as Pennsylvania citizens, have this asset. It's called the state store system. And it's worth a lot. I think the state store system buys more distilled spirits and wine than just about anybody else in the world. And as such, it's a real asset, and it has value. And in places that around the world where they have given public assets away, just given them away. They basically just transferred the asset owned by the citizens of that state to some private entity, private individual, who has made a lot of money on the backs of citizens of whatever country or state gave that away. So we have to be responsible in handling this asset. And that's what gives me concern about simply saying, let's just get rid of something or privatize that. Or we have this. We can argue over whether we ought to have it. I get that. But we have it. And I think the most responsible thing to do is look out for the welfare of the people of Pennsylvania who own this asset. And I am their trustee, and I need to do this responsibly, or shame on me.
Well, I know one of the big arguments against just divesting of the state store system is it's only a one-time windfall. But as budgets get more and more difficult, we're talking about a $2 billion hole in the next budget that needs to be filled, does it become more and more difficult to resist that temptation to look at that asset and say, well, maybe we do need this windfall?
If you look at an asset that's underperforming, the windfall, so-called, that you're going to get is a lot less than you'd get if it were modernized and performing adequately. So I think one of the things that we've got to be concerned about right now is that even if you believe in privatization and that there's a fair way to do it, right now this asset is not performing optimally to get as big a windfall as you might think.